And we are live. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning. I'm good.
Hello.
It's a wonderful day.
Good morning, Vietnam. Man, you are Robin Williams. But to jump into our episode, we are in our John Wooden Pyramid of Success series, and we are in the first block of his Pyramid of Success, which is industriousness. And the industrious definition, according to our very short overview, is there's no substitute for hard work. Worthwhile results come from hard work and careful planning. So our job with this theme and this particular value is to deconstruct it across the month. And today's episode is a deep read where we take a book on that topic and we read it, we distill it down, and we give you practical and actionable advice or suggestions, humble suggestions that you can take and apply to your own context, whether you're an athlete, you're a coach, or you're a parent. But before we jump into that first book, which is The Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter, Embrace Discomfort to Reclaim Your Wild, Happy, Healthy Self, we need to tell you where you can get it. So if you do listen and you would like to go deeper into it, because we're not going to do a live audiobook reading of the whole book, you need to head to bookshop.org. And bookshop.org is an online bookstore that supports independent bookstores and helps you discover books that will help and deepen your understanding of the topics that we cover in the podcast and YouTube channel. By shopping on bookshop.org, why would you shop on bookshop.org? Well, you can find the books that we cover here in the deep reads to help you create an athletic experience that lasts. Plus, by shopping on bookshop.org, you can feel good about knowing that your purchase is supporting independent bookstores. Big fan of the underdogs. Think of bookshop.org like your Rudy of bookshop stores. All right, so the literary community as a whole support that bookshop.org. So in the notes or in the description, we'll leave a link to bookshop.org, our affiliate page, to help support the podcast and channel, to discover the books that will take your learning as an athlete, your parenting, and or your coaching to the next level. Well, sir, we are going to follow our deep read structure. And the first thing we do is we focus the reader. We go into a first draft reading, which is comprehension level, kind of what do we learn about the book, just basics. Second draft reading is what does it say? What does it mean? What does it matter? We'll come out the other side with the most valuable idea, the MVI, kind of like the MVP of books. We'll wrap up with a little bit of an extra challenge and come to a conclusion. You ready to roll?
I'm ready to roll. Before we go though, you said a live book reading. I'm thinking we should start another channel of just live book readings. Once upon a time in a land so far away.
I'll defer on that one. I think that would actually give pretty good views, some like catchy accents, and maybe we do need a dramatic.
It'd be a good way for me to get all the voices out of my head.
I don't even know what to do with that. Don't even know what to do.
All right, let's go.
All right. So focusing the reader. So Michael Easter wrote the book, The Comfort Crisis, and it's a lot about discomfort. So I'd like to play a game with you to start out. You can play along with us of comfortable, not comfortable. And we'll double click on your at least one of them of comfort and discomfort. So let's start with emotional resilience. Are you comfortable or not comfortable with emotions and emotional resilience?
I am not comfortable with emotions. I have one emotion, and that's steady, and it drives my spouse nuts.
Okay.
So I don't do well with going outside of a very small range of emotions.
All right, Mr. Stoic. In another world, you'd be a king. Well, we won't go deeper into that. We'll pick one or two to dive into. How about mental resilience? So controlling your mind, being mentally tough, learning, kind of the thing between your ears. How are you comfortable, not comfortable on mental resilience?
I would say I'm comfortable on that one.
Okay. How about physical resilience? Anything with the body, like movement, aches and pains?
Yeah, I used to say I would be resilient and comfortable in physical resilience. As I get older, that's becoming less and less.
Okay. How about social resilience? So this is the area and realm of relationships. Comfortable, not comfortable?
Comfortable.
Okay. And spiritual. So this is kind of the moral standing ground. We'll use Wooden's terms there, kind of moral condition. How are you in that spiritual realm? Comfortable, not comfortable?
Comfortable. I would say
Okay.
comfortable.
All right. So Jake scored, he said 3 that were comfortable, mental, social, and spiritual. And 1 was kind of in the middle, with physical and then emotional. So I'll let you pick 1 and let's double click on it because I want to learn more. So you want to do not comfortable or comfortable first?
Let's go comfortable first.
All right. Do you want to double click mental, social, or spiritual?
Go social.
All right. Tell me about why you're comfortable with people. What is about that? Because obviously I would classify you a little bit more extroverted than introverted. But what makes it comfortable for you, even though it makes other people very uncomfortable?
I'm an extroverted introvert. I would say first is I'm very confident in who I am. I don't have too many insecurities, thankfully. Not that I shouldn't probably have some, but I don't. So that makes me very comfortable. I'm not second guessing myself that often. And I think the other thing is I'm very trusting of people. I'd probably say more trusting of people than I should be. I think those 2 things make me feel very comfortable around people. I just have a natural disposition to be trusting of other people or the person that I'm engaged with. And then I'm not second guessing or over analyzing myself very often, especially with interactions.
And you could do that with new people, right? I mean, you can walk in a room and gain that comfort pretty steadily.
Yes, though I will say I work up in comfort levels, so I very rarely will just come into a room and be my full-blown self because I know I have right, it's not safe. I might have a sense of humor that rubs somebody the wrong way, or so I'm very aware of myself in that way, but not in like I can go and ease into a conversation, or I really don't have any issues engaging people with I would say harder questions or more serious questions that lead to like true conversations and not just how's the weather today, Bobby? So
like the depth. Yes.
Yeah. Yep. And I think the other thing that's helped me too is I find everybody fascinating. Everybody has an interesting story. Everybody has something in their background that we all could learn from, that we would all benefit from understanding how they went through it, the mental fortitude that it maybe took, or just a variety of that you get in life experience when you go deeper with a person that I find very interesting. And I would argue that I've had a very vanilla background. So that for me is super enticing and engaging, and it's so different from mine. So I think that's why I feel comfortable around people for the most part.
So if you have a Neapolitan background, you need to reach out to Jake in the comments and say, Jake, we need to talk. So
a subtle ice cream joke.
Exactly. You said vanilla. I got you. Now let's move to not comfortable. And we don't have to go too deep. You can just leave it as is, but kind of give me your short nudging. So you said not comfortable, either the emotional resilience, kind of that ups and downs, or physical resilience. Which would you pick?
Let's go emotional. I think that'll be more interesting.
Okay. So tell me, like, if you can be specific without maybe giving too much away, what specifically, minor or major, I would say something minor, emotionally drives you insane. Like, it just, like, I could just, no, absolutely not.
It emotionally drives me insane.
Or irritating, either way.
I think I would say willful ignorance. And that is a twofold path too, because I think there is a lot of irritation that comes from a lack of ignorance, right? If you go to the book of Ecclesiastes, it talks about basically the more you grow in knowledge, the more your sorrow grows, because you're learning all this stuff, and you're learning. If we're talking the context of Ecclesiastes, it would be that there's everything is vain, right? It's all vanity. And so the more knowledge that you grow and the more sorrow that you grow in, and I certainly can attest to that just in life. It's like the more I learn, it's like, oh, I'm really sad that that's the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's this aspect of no matter what evidence, no matter what a person has witnessed, they will still hold on to a belief or to an idea that maybe it's more convenient for them. And I think maybe subconsciously they recognize that, and then they just won't respond to new evidence or to a new experience, and they're just stuck in their ways. That will probably irritate me more than anything else. Or if someone does something wrong, and it's widely believed to be wrong, everybody knows it's wrong, and nothing happens to that person.
High injustice, my man. We could take a VIA character strength test. It's just justice, yes. Scales of justice. Yeah.
Those are some things, man. Willful ignorance is a tough one for me, but that will, both sides of it will get me emotionally going.
Yeah, that's funny. We're gonna have to get you on a willful ignorance rant at some point. But the one of my favorite like characters, maybe it's because I'm lean more introvert, is the Sherlock Holmes, but BBC Sherlock Holmes, like Benedict one. And one of the favorite caricatures of that is he just stares at Watson or whoever's in the room. He's like, what goes on in your little brains? Like, it's just something like that. Because he's so wicked smart and he's way out there. It's like Sheldon in Big Bang Theory. It's like, you know, when we see that bright contrast to the rest of the world, you can just be like, you don't all think this way? You don't see it? So thank you for being vulnerable, because the reason why I wanted to start here is you gave us a really good picture of a regular person and even everybody, that there are things that we are comfortable with that other people might find uncomfortable, and vice versa. We are uncomfortable with some things that other people are comfortable with. And so it's not like this generalized, oh, I like discomfort, you know, hit me again kind of thing, Rocky style. I don't think it's that way. I think there are arenas where comfort comes easy and discomfort comes easy. And that's what Michael Easter really digs into here. So let's move into that first draft reading, that comprehension level understanding. And I'll start with just a couple of quotes that I just pulled. Basic premise of the book. So the comfort crisis kind of gives itself away. But in the book, it says that most people today rarely step outside their comfort zones and kind of live on this little, you know, dinner roll size plate of life. 93%, it said, of our time is spent indoors in climate control. We have first world stress. That's a big one to break apart. We have a longer lifespan, but a shorter health span. So we're living longer, but we're not healthy. And then we are dealing with diseases of despair. So it's not just like, oh yeah, the saber-tooth tiger came and got me. It's like, no, we're just kind of killing ourselves. And one of the basic premises of the book, if there was a summary, is this, and I quote, but a radical new body of research shows that people, us, are at our best, physically harder, mentally tougher, and spiritually sounder after experiencing the same discomforts our early ancestors were exposed to every day. Scientists are finding certain discomforts protect us from physical and psychological problems like obesity, heart disease, cancers, diabetes, depression, and anxiety, and even more fundamental issues like feeling a lack of meaning and purpose. Any thoughts on just the basic premise of the book? What do you think in terms of our world of youth sports or just parenting, coaching in general? What do you think about the idea that we are more comfortable than we've ever been?
Yeah. And everything is geared towards our comfort. I mean, that 93% of time indoors stat is astounding to me, and the impact that probably has on us. I mean, comfort and convenience, right? That's what everything in life has been geared towards the last however many years. You know, like for me, one big comfort thing is my cell phone, right? Feeling like I'm in contact with the world or being able to disengage from the world. And I would say give my emotion, my mind, my physical body, my social experience, my spiritual experience, I'm disconnecting from all of those when I open up a cell phone, and whether it's playing a game, scrolling Twitter, or whatever it may be. People will say, no, it connects you socially. It's the opposite. It's crazy. So that stat really stands out to me. And I just learning experience over the last year, 2 years, specifically with me emotionally, is discovering how much that can actually impact your physical health. When you are trying to contain your emotions in such a small window where you feel comfortable, your body is really holding on to emotion instead of releasing it. And when it holds on to that emotion and it doesn't find a proper way to release it, it can lead to physical manifestations of illness, both mentally and in your body, whether it's diabetes or a cancer or even just aches and pains that can come out that way. So it's in my own life, I'm finding this to be very true, right? Of seeking out your uncomfortable zone emotionally as a way to regulate my system and as a way to have a healthier life.
Yeah, and we'd be remiss. Your wife would be impressed that we'd reference The Body Keeps the Score, which I have not read yet, I'll admit, but I get the premise. I understand. Not fully, but yes, it's very true. And it makes actual real sense if you slow down and think about it. And what I'd like to add to that is you're only as good as your weakest link. I think we learn that, like when you put 9 players on the baseball field, you're only as good as your weakest player, right? But in the terms of discomfort or comfort, you're only as good as your weakest link of your resilience, right? So you can make it a long ways in a lot of cases, with a lot of these being like 4 out of 5 being just rock solid, but that one will get you eventually. It's not if, it's when. So let's play a game. So what happens this is a great book, by the way. Go get the book. I love authors that can weave their narrative into just topics that come up, some big themes. And Michael Easter goes on this journey of learning about discomfort, as we'll learn, taking on a misogi, which is this caribou hunt up in Alaska. And we'll get to that. But he goes through the book and he talks about comfort creeps. So these, I'll call them a roster of discomforts, a lineup. And what I'd like to do, Jake, and we'll go into whichever ones kind of catch our curiosity, is let's do this. I'll name the discomfort. I would like you to give me your gut check. Who is that the hardest on of our audience? Is it the athlete, the coach, or the parent? And you don't have to take complete sides. You could say one or more. And then we'll do us. Like, how do you deal with that? So it's an extended game of comfortable, not comfortable. And you can say as much or as little as you want. Sound good?
Sound great.
All right. So the roster and the lineup, and in more or less chronological order, not alphabetical order. So the first one is just sheer plain vanilla, your word, adversity, which they laughed about. They called it the toughening. So people who face just some adversity, okay, we'll just generalize this, reported better psychological well-being, some challenge, but not overwhelming. So they just had all these positive markers psychologically, physiologically, because they had faced an adverse event. So who do you think this discomfort is hardest on? Athlete, coach, parent, and or parent?
The parent.
Why? I would not have guessed that.
Parent. Oh my goodness. Yes, parent. Parent. I think the kid would be next, and then the coach. And if you have a quality coach, it's really just the parent. If you have a really quality coach, then he's explained it to the parents and there's an understanding. This I see play out in a lot of ways, right? A coach, I heard it best said to me this way. A coach is able to say things to players that parents can't necessarily say. And a coach has to be comfortable with it, but the parent often isn't. And not just say something to them, but put them in situations that a parent, their natural instinct is not to put them in.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you're going to put them on a field or a court where they're not the best not just not the best player, but they're a part of a team that's not the best team on any given day, a parent's natural instinct is not to put their kid in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
Their natural instinct is to put their child in a place where he's going to completely flourish by result, not necessarily by process. Okay.
Yep.
So they are very sensitive to that. Okay. Whether, I mean, you can just take a very simple thing, right? You go and you play a soccer game and your child's going to get kicked. No parent wants to see their child get kicked, but assuming that, you know, their tibia doesn't snap, them getting kicked is building up some sort of physical resilience through that. I mean, it's a very micro example, but it's allowing them to experience pain and have to deal with pain, simple physical way that parents aren't comfortable with. And I think, you know, I've certainly played in plenty of games where one score or the other has been lopsided. I thought the team I had this year was a great example of going through the adversity situations where we wouldn't often be the best team on the field and we'd get spanked 7-8 nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But you could tell by the end of the year how much tougher the kids were.
Yeah.
In a variety of ways, right? They weren't afraid of the adversity in front of them. They were learning now that it's simply a problem to solve. And we have to change, perhaps ever so slightly. Might have to be a little tougher, might have to be a little stronger, might have to play a little faster to meet the adversity that's in front of us. And so it became viewed in a much more healthy way, in a much better way, and they grew because of it. But specifically to your question, it's parents, for me, in my experience, that will struggle with this adversity. Another, I think here's a great example, right? Your child might be the worst or second worst player on the team.
Mm-hmm.
No parent likes that. None. They want to see their kid be the best on the team.
Yep.
So when their kid is struggling relative to the other kids, that is a big red flag for them. They don't necessarily handle that well on average, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that may be a great situation for that child, right? They're surrounded by better players or more athletic humans, and that is causing them to have to raise their ability quicker, or it's more obvious to them that they have to put in more work, things like that. So I think that's one of the big ways that come out. But I would say parent.
I am. How about you? Adversity. You have to go long. Comfortable, not comfortable. Just generalized adversity.
I'm comfortable with adversity. I have no issues with it. Absolutely none. Look, I'm a 5-state redhead. When I played a sport, typically it at least looked like I was in an adverse situation. So I don't have any problem with adversity. It's helped me grow so much that I have become very comfortable with it. And I think that's where a lot of discontinuity will come in between me as a coach and the parents of the kids that I coach, is that I'm far more comfortable putting them in adverse situations than the parents are. And that I think is the underlying thing. It'll manifest in different ways. But yeah, as just an athlete since I was a wee little lad. And being a Minnesota sports fan, just adversity is just something that we are bred in. So
I'm waiting for that adversity build up to pay off, and we just pull off like 3 dynasties, but I think we'll leave that for another day. I would like to add to this. I like your angles. And to be fair to parents, I'm a parent, you're a parent, our kids are playing. It's primal. You want to save your kids. And Easter brings this up, that we had the helicopter parents of the 90s, and now we have the snowplow parents, because we're trying to immediately save them versus playing the long game. And, we don't have to go so far as like the Spartan-a-gogi, like at 12 years old, we're going to send them out and they got to go kill a wolf and all the elements. Like, no, I get that. But at the same time, that adversity is what really drives the development and down the road. And it's not fun. And we don't, I feel like, you don't have to lie to them. Like, yes, I know this is hard, but I love you so much. I need you to experience that. And you still are there. Like, you don't want them to get hurt. Like, there's a difference between being hurt and facing adversity. I think we can all agree on that. Injuries are like aches and pains versus like being actually hurt. But I think that's really interesting. Really, I don't have an issue with adversity either. I learned, through asthma, being overweight, is like, you're not going to be the physically best kid here. So you have to figure out another way. If you're going to play, it's just by default. Like, I know other people don't necessarily experience that, but when you walk in and you're not the best, just by sheer athleticism, I would love for one day to be 6'4", 230, jumping out of the gym. Like, just what is that like? I have no idea. So if you have to constantly work your way up, I think that pays off in the end. And I wish we could get that lesson in other arenas. Well, that's adversity. How about number 2? So this is your second roster lineup of a comfort creep. The second creep, sounds fun, is elements. So we're talking like heat, cold, and nature. So we know that brain-derived neurotropic factor, so BDNF, is released during like saunas. And that brown fat is built up for the cold. You think like Wim Hof method, those cold showers, ice baths, those crazy Scandinavians. But experiencing that discomfort of the elements, and we had this historically before we had all of our current climate control. But what I wanted to highlight here before we get to the comfortable, not comfortable, is the numbers of the nature pyramid. So they did the minimum effective dose, like how much nature do you need to be healthy? This is interesting. So 3 times a week at the very bottom end, we're at the bottom of the pyramid, you need to get outside 20 minutes. And it's amazing that we don't even get that. But 20 minutes, 3 times a week, that's the bottom of the nature pyramid. The second level is 5 hours semi-wild a month. So in the quote was, that's like maybe 1 or 2 hikes, picnics, fishing trips, or a mountain bike rides a month. So you can kind of think your weekend, you go out for a morning or an afternoon. Then the top level, God, this was great. I would love, if I was a researcher for a living, this is what I would have done. I would have been on this team. But they said at the top of this nature pyramid, there's that wild nature, backcountry nature, where you're completely off the grid. They didn't really say as much like how often. I think it would be like once or twice a year. But the researchers did this study with teens. So they sent them out like Montana or something. And they had them bring their phones. So they get to this like beautiful spot and they're starting to take pictures and stuff. And they cut the internet on them. There's no internet. And the kids didn't know it when they were going in. So like they were able to watch the visceral reactions. They're taking all these photos, going to post it to Instagram, TikTok, or whatever, Snapchat, and just the sheer disappointment on their faces. So what they found is day 1 of breaking free from your technology or just being out in really rich nature, your health markers improve and you adjust to discomfort. It's disorienting, right? You're always connected. Now I'm unconnected. Day number 2, your mind settles and your awareness heightens. You start to get your senses back, right? You check in all those 5 senses. And then day number 3, those senses are completely dialed in. And the cool thing that I found was you really switch your brainwave state from beta, so that always on, like to alpha theta, which is the neurological signature of a flow state. So you're just literally on the edge of the flow state where you're focused and a little bit disengaged. So it's just that soft focus that you could just drop in 3 days. I find that vastly entertaining. But to cycle back, you can take any element of this you want. Who are the elements hardest on? Athlete, coach, parent.
That'd be athlete.
Okay.
I think it's because it's oftentimes one of the easiest first grab excuses that you will find. And it's in a lot of ways irrefutable, right? Oh, it's hot out today. Well, okay, yeah, it's hot out today. You're right. You got me. And so I think that's just one of the simple, easy, most probably common excuses or things that players, athletes will grab to, I think, this is kind of off the cuff, so I don't know if it's absolutely true, but just initial thought is younger kids will tend to grab it before an event. They'll grab the weather or the elements to set up a situation where if they fail, they have a backfall, right?
Mhm.
It's almost like a fear of failure thing that they'll grab.
Yep.
Older kids will do it post, right? And that's more of a, I would say, a grab to cover shame of losing, perhaps,
Mhm.
or not performing the way that they wanted to. So I would say players first. And then probably coaches and then parents, I would say.
I would
Because
call, yeah.
go ahead.
I would say it's a toss up for the coach and the parent afterwards, because you and I both been out. We're from Minnesota. I mean, I coach football and baseball. When you're in the early spring or late fall, and you're just, I mean, because when you're an athlete, at least you get to move. I get it. You're out there and, whatever. So I agree with the athlete assessment for the record. But as a coach, you're just kind of sitting there to deal with it. But what I want to call back, so I'm not going to let people off the hook, is there's that thing that there's no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothes. So I think it's a little bit harder on the parents than the coach, because the coach is a little bit more primed to what is the weather like, so they prepare accordingly. Parents, you're rushing around a little bit more, unless you're the person that checks the weather all the time. Maybe you're that person relationship. I'm not. I'm like, oh, cool. It's cold. Great. I'll throw on a hoodie. But I agree. I think that's really interesting. I would have to look at the younger and older, like the built-in excuse factor. I see people really struggling with the elements. I think that's just because it's only the people that aren't out in the elements. I think the more removed you're from the elements, the more sensitive you get to them. And the people that are out more, it's just like, yep, whatever. They don't notice. That's why kids can go outside without coats all the time. They're like, I don't know, I'm just playing them in flow. This is good. So, okay. Now, how about you? Elements.
Yeah, it's the older I get, the more I hate them. It's just a fact.
Slow down. Okay.
But at the same time, moving to Arizona, we've spent more time outside than ever before. There's poison snakes here, so just being outdoors for me is a bigger discomfort than it was in Minnesota. But at the same time, it's far more rewarding. It has been out here, being out in nature and going on hikes and seeing the mountains and the desert and the tarantulas and all that good stuff. So yeah, it's definitely a discomfort for me, but it's an easier discomfort to engage in than others, I think is how I would describe it.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with this. I struggle more with heat than I do with cold. I've had a pretty consistent cold shower practice ever since I read Joel Runyon's work. He's the Impossible HQ guy. He has the cold shower therapy app, and there's also some on the Android store as well. But mostly because it's just, it's hard. I mean, it doesn't ever get easier necessarily. I mean, it's still cold when you get in, but you just get used to it. So I don't really have an issue with the elements. The heat is a struggle with me, especially when the breathing gets to be an issue. I think that just triggers my habit of not being able to breathe at times. So, but it's all good. Number 3 on the roster of comfort creeps. I don't know if this is the best of the 3, but it's pretty simple, actually. Novelty. And the reason why I chose that word is just learning new things, being at your best in the present moment. So some people do not continue to engage and learn and grow. And that is one thing that wards off dementia and Alzheimer's, is you kind of the wooden maxim of when you're through learning, you're through. So to keep it short, we're going to keep the roster moving. Who do you think this is hardest on? Who is it? Who are the people, athletes, coach, or parent, that struggle the most to learn new things and grow and challenge themselves? We can have ties.
Yeah, I mean, my first instinct is to say coaches here. I think there's been a little bit more of a movement for experts to continue learning, but think, let me put it this way. If you're supposed to be an expert in something and you have to admit that you're learning, just generally, it's an uncomfortable thing.
Yep.
It's an uncomfortable thing. I heard a quote recently that awkwardness is simply accelerated learning.
Ooh.
But when you're supposed to be the quote unquote smartest person on the field, or everyone's looking to you for answers, awkwardness is not a good feeling to have. And so I think that's when our pride can come to the door a little bit. And so I think it's just harder for that resident expert to feel comfortable in novelty and learning something new, because they're supposed to know it all already, right? That's why they're there, in theory. I think if you actually ask people, they wouldn't say that, but when you're in those social atmospheres, I think that's our tendency to feel. So coach, I would say parent, I think is more, if I'm comparing parents and kids, right? You just have more life experience. So there's a lot more filter there that you're having to run new information through.
Yep.
And that's an uncomfortable thing, where as a kid, they're still in a situation where they don't know what they don't know. So they're soaking it all in. That's just their mindset. That's how their brains are wired to learn, and soak in as much as they can. I mean, that's what their days are. That's what they're going to school and learning. They're going to practice and learning, and all along the way. And that's why, kids will sit there and just ask you 150 questions, all over the map, right? So that their brain's just wired in a better way to learn and to be exposed to novelty than an adult is. So that's really the difference with the players and the parents. But for me, it would be coaches.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. We're just going to be shooting gold here, because that awkwardness is accelerated learning is beautiful, but I don't want to dissolve or to combine. I want to just break apart. I'm trying to say the difference between confidence and competence. Just because you're confident, and Maria Konnikova, she also wrote The Biggest Bluff, but she wrote The Confidence Game, why we fall for it every time. So the person that's the loudest or just the most composed seems to think they just know everything. And this it's a phenomenon as well, and we could go into it, but I agree with you. Just don't stop learning. Yes, you start to identify patterns over and over. I think coaches do that. Once I've seen one, I've seen them all, but you got to force yourself to treat each athlete as their own thing. Yes, there's patterns. I get it. I've seen this before, but there's still nuance within the pattern. And you can't do that. You got to kind of stop yourself, be mindful. I would give the tie to the parents and the athletes, though. This is where the confidence game does come in, where I don't ever want to be a parent where I feel like I know more than the coach, even if I do, right? I don't want to put somebody in that uncomfortable position. And that's not a good discomfort. That's a bad discomfort, right? Yes, there's going to be a sport you know more about, and that's okay. But if you do, then either go coach or let it happen, right? And that's something that's very hard, or just help out as much as you can. Right. But for kids, I think this is where they do gain a little confidence. This is why I want to make this point. And they think they know everything. They're seeing results. They're getting confident, right? But there's still so much to learn. I think that's one of the difference between beginners and an expert is like experts not only know what they don't know, they know what they don't know either. Like there's so much more, like Mickey Mantle kind of idea. Where there's so much about this game I don't know. So I would agree with that. That's a good assessment.
Yeah, fake it till you make it. That's what I heard on the Anna Kournikova bit. And I think just real quick on your point of you don't ever want to feel like a parent that you know more than the coach. You may know more X's and O's. You may know more technically about a given sport, but if you're not there with the kids each practice and engaging with them each practice, you're not learning the subtleties of that team. You're not learning how kids are relating to each other. You're not learning how the different kids learn. And so there's a really wide gap of knowledge that you don't have not being there. So yes, you may have an idea that says, well, this would work. Well, maybe what that group needs isn't that right now. or that's not how they would learn it. And so you have to be okay with that, right? There's multiple ways to skin a cat. So don't just get obsessed with one way.
No. All right, we're going to speed it up because we're going to get to, I know you're on a timer and so am I. We'll do a couple of these as speed rounds.
Okay.
All right, so we have 4, 5, and 6 is relationships. So the idea of relationships, not bad relationships. The context is that social connections are, according to the Harvard Grant study, the best predictor of happiness over the long term. So good relationships beat fortune, fame, and even nutrition. So they're even better than smoking cigarettes. It's a great TED Talk as well. But the increased risk of dying in the next 7 years, or I think it's decreases risk of dying in the next 7 years by 26%. Lifespan by 15 years. So if you don't have good relationships, it reduces your lifespan by a significant amount. So who is relationships hardest on?
I don't know. I would say overall this is an issue in youth sports, but quickly, not kids. For the most part, kids usually just jump right into jump right in together. Coaches have the challenge of fostering multiple relationships with multiple different humans, so that can be a challenge. And parents. I'm gonna say coaches from the perspective of just all the different relationships they have to juggle. Might be toughest for them and the different ways to do that. And then I would say the parents, in terms of how to relate to the coach, how to build that relationship with the coach. Because even ones that are, I've noticed that have the right intention and the right way to approach a coach are very unsure of themselves still because they're afraid of impacting their kid. They're afraid of coming across as a complainer or whatever. So I think that relationship is very tough, that coach-parent relationship. And I think the kids are jumping in no problem. So 1A and 1B for coach and parents, I would say.
If you made me pick in the gut, I would have picked parents, because how do you relate to people you don't see very often? Or, when your kids are competing against each other, or maybe there's already, well, it depends. If you're like the new family, or, your kid's playing and another kid's not, like everybody knows the internal drama that's going on in the team. Like, how do you, I don't want to say stay professional or stay classy amidst when like, especially if there's friction there. So kind of that false pretenses. I think it helps to have a little bit of perspective, but we'll keep it at that. Number 5 is lonely. So I want to be the distinction between isolation and solitude. So isolation, bad. You're escaping life. That's bad. Leads to depression. Please see help. We are not doctors and we aren't playing them on the internet. Versus solitude. So the idea of loneliness is the capacity to be alone. And most people, golly, this study, I just blew my mind. I highlighted it. Most people, Jake, would rather shock themselves than be alone in a room by themselves. Like, given the choice of sitting in a room by themselves or shocking themselves with a researcher there, most people would rather shock themselves. Now, we're not talking like, zap, like you're going to get tasered here, but like enough to be annoying. So who do you think struggles most? This one's a little harder. Athlete, coach, parent.
So people would rather shock themselves than be in a room by themselves, and we as a society lock people in a room by themselves for at least a year? What in the world are we doing? Oh my goodness. Okay, sorry. Who struggles the most? Kids. Kids have such a natural, strong propensity to be social and do things together. And they would, in my mind, in theory, they would have less tools at their disposal to deal with being isolated. So that, I would say kids. I think coaches love getting that isolation, quite honestly. Gives them time to think and process all the information going on in their heads. At least it does for me. I really don't have any issue with the isolation. I would rather be isolated than shocked. So I'd say coaches last and parents in the middle.
Yeah. I think parents just don't even get the option. I agree. You just get a couple of seconds to yourself. And that comes up later in silence. So, all right. I wrote it down. Athletes, I'll agree with that one. One thing I want to say is, like, give your kid, I know you were a only child for a bit. They need a little bit of space sometimes. Like, because if you're constantly interacting with a sibling or, maybe even cousins or, parents, whoever is in that kid's life, you just need a little bit of distance to just do whatever the heck you want. Like, and that comes up later in this next topic and the one following, but it just, really a little bit of not isolation, solitude, where you just get no constraints. Anyways, number six.
No, I got to touch on this. So as parents, right, we have 4 kids. We have done a thing, and it's really interesting how this has worked. This is why I want to share this. But we will do a thing where if like 2 of them are kind of getting at each other's nerves or getting at each other, we will just tell one to go to their room. Now, never has it been a thing where out of anger, we have told someone to go to their room, right? But when we tell them to go to the room, it's like this automatic response that what we are telling them is a punishment.
Oh, yeah.
No matter, we've explained this so many times. Like, no, we're not punishing you, but the situation that you had found yourself in with your sibling was creating poor behavior on your part, was creating inappropriate behavior on your sibling's part, right? And just it wasn't a good interaction. So we stepped in to give you a break to stop that and give you time to self-reflect and say, how did I get in that situation? How was my response? Whatever. They still, to this day, hey, just go to your room. I'm not going to my room. No, we just think you need to take a break. That's all. We're not even mad at you, but there's just this preconceived notion, and I'm not entirely sure where they got it from, that putting them in an isolation or solitude situation is a punishment to them. Just found that fascinating. Wanted to share it. Okay, we can move on.
Oh, that's so good. Removal, it's talking about habits as well, and that's a book we'll be covering soon. But just the literal removal of negative stimulus, like just don't even get in the situation. Sometimes it is good to walk away. So. Number 6 is boredom, and I'm going to layer in silence because, the lonely, or I would say solitude, boredom, and silence are kind of all together, but boredom, because I'll pick up the pace, is, oh man, this was great. This is your phone thing. So here's your stats, Jake. I've been waiting for this one. Average American, according to Michael Easter's book, checks their phone 2,617 times, 2 hours, 30 minutes, / 4 hours a day. And they asked one kid, in his class, because he's a professor, he's like, why do you check it so much? Because YouTube, Mr. Easter. But the thing is, in the book, they said boredom isn't good or bad necessarily. It's what you do with it. So it spurs us to action, to do something. Like, I'm bored. Well, find something to do, right? I had a coach that I worked with. He said boredom is a choice. And I don't think boredom is bad, because here's why. Because Scott Barry Kaufman, a great podcast, psychology podcast, said the default mode network, which is activated during boredom, where you're not consciously on, is called the imagination network, according to him. And they called it like focus mode versus non-focus mode. And this really helps because it wires our creativity. It lets our minds wander, kind of lets that dust settle in that snow globe kind of concept. What they equated it to was, you laugh. Have you ever seen those? You probably laughed at them, like 2-pound dumbbell weights. Like, they're just stupidly small.
Yep.
Where if you started doing bicep curls, like you do 10 of those, that's nothing. But they said what's happening to our mind is we do rep after rep after rep, like on loop, and we're exhausted. So our mind is just 2-pound weight, 2-pound weight, 2-pound weight. Eventually, that 2-pound weight is going to feel like a 200-pound weight. And Dr. Judson Brewer had the most unbelievable quote on this. I want to get your reaction to this. He said, I wouldn't pin mental health, which is a very big deal right now in society / youth sports, on mobile technology 100%. So he's like, okay, it's not 100%, but I'd say it's 90% due to it. He said that the people said that the devil is in our phones, according to a former Facebook exec, and it's ripping apart the fabric of our society. And the reason why I actually went on a dumb phone, technically it's called the wise phone, which is kind of fun irony, just has calls and texts, is that BJ Fogg of the Stanford Behavior Institute, the social media is stacked against you. It is a 100% losing game. You are facing the best behavior scientists who know what they're doing, and you are not going to win. You can tell me all the strategies you want. I will just admit I refuse to play the game. So what they really said is that we need more boredom equals less phone. And that we just need this little bit of time of silence where we get a little less sensory input and just let it be. So my rant aside about boredom, where do you think this is actually a struggle? This might be harder than we think, because I've ranted on kids before about those social media, but I think the adults are just big kids in this point. So what do you think about boredom / silence, according to Michael Easter and the comfort creep?
Yes, we've definitely lost our ability to be comfortable in boredom. The internet bit, it can be used. It's such a great tool, and this is why I have issue relating to it. Like, I totally get it that people just watch pointless YouTube videos for forever, but the amount of information that is shared on the internet is incomprehensible. And one of my pet peeves is people like, "Oh, would you just learn that on the internet?" Yeah. Why is that not an appropriate information stream? Like, I can get access to so many articles, I can get access to so many books, I can get access to videos that are basically long articles, essentially in video form or in audio form. So for me, like, my issue with my phone is I am so addicted to taking in information.
Mm-hmm.
But I need to find a healthy way to then outlet all of that information and have a consequence or purpose in being addicted to the information. Like, currently, I'm just absorbing all of this information, and then it just sits there for me to go have a beer with somebody and talk their ear off about, did you know the CIA just came out and admitted that they killed JFK? Did you hear that? Yep. And it's really an unconsequential thing. So
don't get us, YouTube algorithm. Stay away. We did not say anything.
Yeah,
about
sorry.
Fed acronym.
Yeah, my bad. 3-letter agencies, no good.
Yes, there we go.
So for me, it's that, like, I'm addicted to all of the information coming in. I'll watch golf videos, but I do that so I want to be a better golfer. That's it, right? So there is a purpose behind it. Mm-hmm. In some ways. In other ways, it's just absorbing information for the sake of absorbing information. But for people who say, well, you just learn that on the internet, right? I can learn anything on the internet, because not only do I have access to one argument, I have access to all 17 arguments around a given topic. Yeah. And I can look at all of them. Like, that's incredible. No one in human history has had that. We have such an amazing tool. And unfortunately, we have used it to watch other people do things instead of doing them ourselves quite often.
Correct. Who did you say? Go before you add that. Who is the hardest on?
Good point. I haven't actually answered the question.
Yeah, I know. I got it right.
I would say kids, because it's more accessible to them, and I think there's an element of them being opened up to a lot of information that they can take in and being addicted to that, as well as just mindless, blind entertainment. And then again, it's such a toss-up between coaches and parents. I would tend to lean parents. It might be harder on. Mm-hmm. Especially in today's world where things are, number one, becoming more specialized. So like a soccer program lasts 9 to 10 months. Mm-hmm. So there's that inherent thing. Like, I want my kid to do multiple things, but also this one thing takes up all of this time. So how do I do multiple things with my child? So I totally have sympathy there, but at the same time, these kids are in like 700 different things.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that is the parents pushing them. I don't know if they're not wanting their child to be bored, or they just like being on the, maybe they're addicted to it. But I would say that parents would be second on the list.
I would like to add two things, one for you and one for the audience, maybe both for the audience, is Tim Ferriss in the 4-Hour Workweek talked about just-in-time information. He called it a low information diet, where you only engage with the information you're actually going to use. Everything else has to go. And it's in the 4-Hour Workweek. It's great. You can find it, low information diet. And so he actually recommended not reading any nonfiction, just completely disengaging. And then you get fiction at your leisure, but it's just information that you're using to produce something. So that's really interesting. And then I'm ahead in our book series, obviously. So we're recording this, but we have other, deep reads coming. But in Atomic Habits, I don't remember the guy's name actually, but he installed something with their internet router where it'll automatically shut off at 10 p.m. every night. So like when the internet goes down, like 10 p.m. we're done. You go to bed. I think the main idea here is positive constraints. If you give your kid Dr. Judson Brewer a crack device and they don't have any semblance of structure, how do you think that's going to go? And I'm not here to judge, and I still don't. We'll have to talk about what we do with phones and our kids eventually. But I just know that it has been a disaster, especially for young girls, where they're comparing themselves to others, and it's very unrealistic. And it feels like once you get on that train, it's really hard to get off. So due to time's sake, I want you to pick. So I'll give you one more of the creeps. So I'll name them all off. You pick. So we have addiction, hunger, and death. Those are the last three comfort creeps. There's also sanitization in there, like, over sanitizing and cleanliness. But I'll just run with those three. So addiction, hunger, or death.
Death.
Oh, all right. Fair enough. All right. So death. The idea behind this was that Easter went to Bhutan. I think I'm saying that right. It's one of the happiest places on earth. And man, this section was unreal because they have, Jake, get this, a national curriculum to think about death. Just think about death, period, anywhere from 1 to 3 times daily. Now, you would like this, Mr. Stoic. Memento mori, which means to think about death. And they're much more interested. They're Eastern philosophy, right, versus Western. They don't really care about gross domestic product. They care more about the GDP, gross domestic, like personal happiness kind of idea, right? So Easter's trip, like he was faced with death. Like he hadn't really killed anything before, right, as hunting. But he was reminded by his guides, whether you are into hunting or not, that caribou don't age out, right? They're going to get killed from a predator. They're going to starve, drown, freeze, or get outcompeted by a younger buck of sorts. And it's not like Bambi or, something like that, where they're just like, oh, they're going to be surrounded by all their animal friends. And we're going to have this peaceful funeral and it's beautiful. There's flowers coming down from the sky and there's a sunset. Nature is brutal. And you can take this one of two ways, buddy. So death in general, like in terms of a human life, which is very jarring in terms of when we lose somebody on our team or our community, that is very hard, rocks people's worlds. Or you can take the angle of the death of your career. And I think that is also something that we ward off as long as we possibly can. And I mean official career, because you can keep playing, but like organized sports, middle school, high school, college, pro kind of thing. So either angle, athlete, coach, parent, who struggles with death in terms of youth sports?
I'm going to say the players struggle with, at least, because there's always something next in their youthful stage of life. Obviously, it's different if you're a 35-year-old and retiring from professional sports, but players would be the easiest. I think being a parent now, this is a little tougher. Because you spend 10 years of your life, if you just have one kid, potentially, running to different events, spending significant amount of time in the car. That would be tough. That would be a really hard thing to engage when it's the end of your athletes playing. Coaches, I'm going to be jaded on this one because honestly, I've just coached for so long that I look forward to the breaks. It's almost over, and like I can almost see my own family. So for me, it would go parents, coach, player.
But it is everyone.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh
yeah. Yeah, and I wish it just wasn't so jarring. Like when you have those coaches who do give you the perspectives, like, hey, this is the last time you're going to be on this field. You don't think about that. Right. You know, I know there's that one quote that was out there. Same thing with like playing in the backyard. It's like, yeah, there was this time that was the last time you played pickup basketball with your buddies. Like, whoa, you're like, yeah, that's true. And so what they said more or less is that this makes you happier. You know, really having a grateful perspective, it gives you perspective, it gives you distance. And you think of anybody with an NDE, like a near-death experience, or you are faced with the ending of anything, I think it helps to have older siblings where they get to go through and then they're done. So if you get to see this, and I know it's not comfortable, the point of the book is to embrace discomfort, but that you see that it's not permanent. It's, you know, it's not always going to be this way. The idea of impermanence brings appreciation. And anytime we can enhance gratitude, makes you savor and enjoy it all that more. So both things that are happiness hacks as well. All right, buddy, we made it through. If you disagree with us, especially Jake, not me, we're probably all on the same page. But if you disagree with Jake, make sure you send angry comments below. But let's go to a second draft reading. We're going to speed up. So, you know, kind of the first section, we get to dive in, talk about bigger topics. It's not always going to be evenly distributed in these deep reads. Depends what catches us. But the second draft reading. So I want to talk about 4 points. You can pick any of the 4 that you'd like to highlight. But when you get to second draft reading, you come back to the text, you say, okay, so what? Like, what does it say? That's what we just did. What does it mean? What does it matter? Like, okay, discomfort. Okay. So 4 things. Number 1 is the flow cycle. So the flow cycle was with Herb Benson in the book, The Breakout Principle. It's also in Stephen Kotler's work as well. But the flow cycle is 4 stages. Flow isn't an on and off switch where you're in and you're out. You have to go through these 4 distinct stages. So it's struggle, number 1, release, flow, and then recovery. And what I want people to know is if you want more flow on the other side, you need to work on your struggle. It's not about flow. You just focus on the struggle and recovery. And I think that's what we learned through those different comfort creeps. People are terrible at active recovery. They like to have a comfort blanket. Easter's was alcohol. And that's a whole discussion in of itself. What is your comfort blanket? But how much struggle? It's 1 inch at a time, 1%, 4% at the max. So if you're trying to say, how much should I push myself? How much discomfort can I realistically take? If it's too big, you're not going to do it. I don't care how big your frog is. You still got to cut it up into pieces and take a bite at a time. So 1 to 4%. And then really dialing in your active recovery. You're only, like, what did Tom Brady say? You're only as good as, your ability to recover. Your ability to perform is only as good as your ability to recover. So if you don't have in those breaks, a lot of people that get into flow work or peak performance, man, they're great at pushing themselves. They're not great at putting back in. So if you have a garbage active recovery routine, that's 1. Number 2, this is probably one of my favorites. Characterize your creeps. So we just talked about comfort creeps. And this is a concept, I believe, in either Tribe of Mentors or Tools of Titans. Somebody can correct me. But it was inviting Mara to tea. And it's this kind of deity-like person who's a little bit of an antagonist, but you befriend the things that are hard with you. And in super better language from Jane McGonigal, she calls this a bad guy. Anything that inhibits you from reaching your goal. What's interesting is if you can personify that, like turn this non-human thing into a human, you can then spot it, notice it. There's a mindfulness strategy. And then you make it playful. Usually you can give them funny persona names as well. I don't know how we would characterize this. It would be kind of funny. But if you can characterize it, it loses its power. And then if you, I can't remember the stupid spell in Prisoner of Azkaban of Harry Potter, but when you can make it funny, I think it was the Boggart or Bogart, one of the two. But if you can make that fear thing, because the Boggart that comes out and it shows you what you're most afraid of, if you can dress your fear up in a dress or whatever makes you laugh, right? I'm thinking kind of stereotypically at this point, but if you put death in a dress of pink flowers, like that's funny. Like it's weird. It's different. It loses a little bit of its luster. So whatever your comfort creep is, characterize it, personify it, and go from there. Number 3, central governor theory. Oh man, you will love this one. Exercise-induced fatigue is predominantly a protective emotion. So what that means is our limits are not physical limits. They're emotional limits. So our limbic system. So they did this test with, people on a bike, stationary bike, and they put them up to their VO2 max. And as closer they got to that max, their emotional centers lights up. So it stops us from hurting ourselves. But the trick is you can get past that. So exercise-induced transient hypofrontality, when your brain shuts up, is about 15 minutes. That's why you want to gradually warm up so you can get out of your own head. So that's a cool one. I think you might touch on that one. Stephen Kotler also put in our country that the body always makes a comeback. Your emotions don't always mean what you think they mean. And you just kind of got to be like, yep, whatever. Sounds good. Talk, stupid governor in my head. And then the last one, I think this is more for parents and coaches, is the idea of finding your fitness. So coaching and parenting is very time consuming, even if it doesn't matter. If you have a job and you are coaching in any capacity, you don't have a lot of time in the day. But I've seen time and time again that fitness has to be non-negotiable. It is probably the closest thing to a miracle cure we have. It wards off all sorts of maladies. I'm not saying you have to appear on the cover of a magazine, but you do need to take care of yourself. Like you got to put on your own oxygen mask, and whatever that is finding your own fitness. Joseph Pilates said physical fitness is the first requisite of happiness. It builds up that sleep pressure. It's mentally invigorating. It's all good. So what I mean by find your fitness is I could give 2 craps what you choose to do as long as you enjoy it. Walk, yoga, lifting. We could go into a whole segment on, different types, and maybe we'll have to. So fitness friendly, protocols for coaches and parents. But just do something for gracious sakes. So find the time, even if it's just a few times a week, get it in and be a good example for yourself and for others. So we have the flow cycle, Jake, characterize your creeps, central governor theory, and find your fitness. Anything you like to add on the second draft reading concepts?
I love the characterizing the creeps part. That can be a lot of fun for a team, and not just one, right? But it can be any given day. If you notice a team is struggling with something, personify it, right? Like even if they're struggling just to pass the ball to each other, take whatever sport, they're struggling to pass the ball together. Okay. Well, let's say there is now a big scary person named Carlton who is preventing them from passing the ball. We need to defeat Carlton. Can we do it? Right? Or the big spaghetti monster, whatever you want to call it. I don't care. I love that idea. I think the kids would find would have a whole heck of a lot of fun with that.
Okay, can I stop you? So we're gonna have to put this link in the show notes. You've seen Patch Adams, right?
Yeah.
Do you remember the scene where he's seeing these squirrels, and he's just dude, they're the nicest, most comfortable creatures on the face of the planet, and that whole scene with Robin Williams where they're shooting it so he can go to the bathroom. That's the difference right there. You know what this is? A bazooka. It's just, but you're right. You imagine calling a timeout and you come in and you're probably furious. The team is losing. Fans are screaming, depending on what sport you're playing. You're like, all right, guys, we got to beat Carlton. Who is Carlton? Carlton, we need to take him down. This is a all hands on deck effort. It's funny. It diffuses it. It's great. I think we really hit something here. Maybe we got to license this before it gets out of it.
I think so. We often name, actually there's a real life thing that happened that I'll share. So when I was coaching high school soccer, we played a team, and the team that we're playing had one kid who was dynamite, great player, right? Well, after he scored 4 goals on us in the first time, around, I think, late in the first half, early in the second half, our kids figured out what his name was. His name was Luis. So the halftime talk was about stopping Luis. Now, this is actually a person that we have now personified. It's not just some force out there, right? Though I think we can tend to our brains kind of interpret it like that, especially in a team event. So then we ended up playing again in the playoffs. The whole preparation wasn't just to stop this player, but the player had a name, and the player was very specific in the kids' heads.
Mm-hmm.
And gosh, by golly, we did it. Like,
mm-hmm.
he didn't do anything. We ended up winning the game, all sorts of fun. But I think now that we're taking this on and thinking about this, I think a lot of it had to do with the problem that they were facing was personified. It was a human. And that made it much more relatable for them to stop it. And made it a lot more exciting for them to stop it, because now it was a tangible castle to conquer, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely.
Right? And I know that's bringing in some other books that some others may have written. But yeah, I think it's very real. But you can, from just a player to anything that's giving your team fits, make it feel like a human that they're trying to take up. And then, the central governor theory is great. This is great. I actually have a name or an idea behind it. I've often tried to convey this to my teams that I've coached, that no, you don't need to stop. Something in your head's telling you to stop, but believe me, you can go a lot further. You can go a lot longer. You're right now, your body is controlling your brain, and you need your brain to control your body.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, this is tired. No, it's not. You need to change your mindset and tell your body that it's not tired yet, because it doesn't have a choice.
Just hold up a number. Yeah, you're just in first gear, dude. I need to. Give me second gear. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I really love that. Both of those things. And, even giving the power, I call it a game clincher. So in writing, we have topic clinchers, topic sentences, but even giving the power of like cooperative characterization. Kids come up with some of the funniest names. And they're just stupid, ridiculous. I think even the more ridiculous, the better. All right, last couple things. I'm going to jump ahead to the end. So I'm going to do the last 2 things, and we're going to circle back to one of the key collaborations from this book that people need to know. So most valuable idea first, and then we'll end with the discomfort challenge and come back to this misogi, because I want to get your thoughts on a misogi and how it applies. So the most valuable idea. So what do we get from the comfort crisis, and what do we learn about industriousness in the concept of Wooden's pyramid of success? Well, discomfort makes you dangerous. That is really the biggest thing here. And it means you're going in the right direction. Now we're talking about working hard at this point. We'll talk about working smart in future deep reads with books, but really lean in with those first 2 seconds. Flow begins when you say yes to the fight. It's called the flinch, according to Julian Smith, which we'll talk about too, or the 2-minute rule from James Clear. Get into it, lean in, and it goes away. I think we have this assumption that we do hard things like it's just going to be easy. Like, embrace that it's going to be hard. CrossFit's the embrace the suck thing, but don't lie to yourself. Yeah, it's going to be hard. Okay. And then you're not caught blindsided like, oh yeah, I'm going hard. It's not exactly easy. But I think the more you lean into it and you get the joy of working hard, it's good to go. And then the discomfort challenge is go back to the beginning of the episode and pick the one either you're good at or the one you want to work at, mental, physical, social, emotional, or spiritual, and try something discomforting. So if it's mental, maybe you take on a cold shower, a couple minutes of boredom a day, maybe a week without social media, like Cal Newport. He'd love you for that. Physical, maybe do a fast. Check with your doctor. Again, we're not doctors. Or maybe some sort of hard physical challenge. I know Murph is a hero workout that is popular in CrossFit and the GoRuck community. Social, maybe it's just reaching out relationships, or some other social challenge, maybe like a letter, that is also good. And if it's emotional, maybe it's solitude, boredom, silence, something of that. Spiritual, you're on your own. So, but I want to finish with this, is the misogi. So
Hey, hold on, actually, real quick.
Okay.
In terms of the spiritual aspect, and as we talk about what we talked about, take on the topic of death.
Ooh, that's good.
Just one example of how to make yourself spiritually uncomfortable. Take on the topic of death. Look into that. Think about it. Meditate on it.
There's all sorts of good stuff that comes from that memento mori. Good call. All right, misogi. Well, because I know we got to wrap up for you, is a little bit of a choose your own adventure. So a misogi is let me rewind a little bit. One of the quotes from the book, which was cool, was if you want to have amazing experiences, you have to put yourself in amazing places. And so this concept of a misogi, it's also in an Outside magazine article. Kyle Korver's featured in it, former NBA player, 3-point specialist. But this concept of, I think I would love for athletes, coaches, and parents to make a misogi. So what is a misogi? It is a challenge, physical challenge, where you only have a 50-50 shot at best of succeeding. So it's a very hard challenge. So some of the rules, suggestions, and then we'll get your reaction and how we can apply this. Number one, make it really hard. Again, 50% failure rate if you do it right. Number two is don't die. Now, they mean that literally. So some of the misogis are quite challenging, but just have a safeguard, kind of like that bell at, buds training. Like you can ring the bell and quit if you need to. Other guidelines. So it's not about physical accomplishment. It's what are you mentally and spiritually willing to put yourself through to be a better human? That's a game changer. It's about a latent potential you didn't know you had. It's a little bit of a hero's journey, right? You go out of your realm, and you take on a challenge. You come back home. You're a changed person. I like the quirky, creative, or far out. So it's just different, right? Make it your challenge. A misogi is you versus you. Don't do something somebody else has done before. Make it you versus you. Don't advertise misogi. So that was huge. I'm like, oh my goodness. People put it up on social media. Yeah, I'm doing this challenge. I'm running a marathon. It's like, no, it's all about you. Because what are you going to do when nobody knows? What are you going to do when you're on your 24th mile and nobody knows except you that you quit? Like, what do you got when nobody's watching? A perfectly designed misogi, they said, is you give it everything you've got and you just finish it, or you just barely fail. The benefits. So what do you get when you do this? Earn confidence, composure, psychological distancing and perspective. So your ability to, I've gone through something so hard that this thing that I'm dealing with right now, it pales in comparison. The idea is that, like MJ, he practiced so hard that games were just easy to him. And I think that is just a habit you can build. Kyle Korver, he did this paddleboard challenge. He barely ever paddleboarded before. And he said that was the reason why he got that NBA record for consecutive 3-pointers, because it was just, I can't think about where I'm going. I just got to go one paddle at a time, one 3-pointer at a time. The suggestions were 1 to 2 times a year. And the one thing I was thinking about was kind of like the CrossFit Games, like a beginning test and an end test of a season. So you set up a challenge, you test yourself. You're like, okay, here's where I'm at. And then you retest or post-test in athletes. So Jake, misogi, apply misogi, succinctly or comprehensively. How can we apply this big discomfort challenge? I'm not talking about minor discomforts, like stinking hard. Could this be applied to youth sports, whether athlete, coach, or parent? Either way, what do you think about misogi for youth sports?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this comes down to the coach initially, and you can find ways to set them up for your team. Mm-hmm. You can encourage each player to come up with one themselves, and that can be a variety of things. For me, I would say juggling, right? Juggling a soccer ball. Mm-hmm. Nobody knew I was doing it. I would do it on my own. And I was so invested in it to get to X amount of juggles, right? So like start where you're at. Okay, I juggled. Oh, hey, I got 10. All right, well, by halfway through the season, I want to be able to get 300. I mean, something far out, but something that somebody has done before. So how do you do it? And that's really all you're working with. And that, I mean, I remember I'd get so invested that I would mess up and I'd just start swearing to the ether. So something like that. The team one could be a little bit tougher to come up with. That is something that's practicable and not practical, practicable for them to achieve. And for parents, I think this is a great way to especially for those that really want to be hands-on parents and coach their child, but not actually coach their child. This might be a good tool for you to do that on an individual basis, right? So you can direct all of that desire for them to be the best into one specific task or goal or misogi to help them improve and to get that coach passion directed in a healthy way, as opposed to telling the team what to do or telling them what to do specifically while they're playing a game. Like, no, we don't need to step into that arena. It's a great outlet for a parent to do. So first, I think it starts with the coaches. Can you inspire your kids to come up with them on their own? Can you find ways to challenge the group? And then kids, the always saying yes thing is huge. I heard recently someone talking about how to make your first $1 million in life, right? So we're taking this beyond the sports realm. We're taking it into life. And he said, one of the things you have to do is you have to say yes to everything. Someone wants to go get lunch, say yes. Then we go get coffee, and then you have another person want to go get coffee, say yes to both and figure out how to do it. Even if you're sitting at the same diner seat and one leaves and the next one just comes, say yes. Because eventually in life, when you become successful, you are going to have to say no to things when you prioritize your life. But when you're learning and you're growing, say yes every time. Say yes. And I think it's such a good thing that we can instill in our athletes. Say yes. Coach wants you to play a certain position. Say yes. Coach is asking you to do 100 push-ups. Say yes. Just say yes. That's all you need to get accustomed to doing. And so if we can use it to foster in how to create challenges and to stretch and grow themselves, I think that would be great. So athletes say yes, coaches get creative, and parents, this might be a really good outlet for you to get engaged with your athlete.
And it's really a missing score in my personal opinion. So when I did the studies on autotelic athletics and looking at how do you create an athletic experience that lasts, Chip and Dan Heath put it perfectly in The Power of Moments. They had yet to meet a coach, and I'm sure that's not technically true, but that had done this kind of before and after. We have the technology. Like this to say, I am not going to be defined by wins and losses. I'm going to be defined by how much did you get better, you versus you, from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. I don't care what you pick. Your baseball swing, the number of times you can juggle, 3-pointers made, your shooting, I don't know, pick. But the ability to individualize that, we're not talking like 20 things. We're talking 1 to 3 things a season. And do it for the team and the individual. Right? If you want to learn James Harden's step back move, sweet, do it. And then do it faster and do it faster and do it faster. So I think that 50-50 approach where you allow time and practice where we're working on this, beginning, middle, and end of the year, for the individual and the coach, or not the coach, the team. Like having team challenges, right? How many, layups can we make in 1 minute? Go. It doesn't have to be rocket science. You have to optimize for whatever you want to get better, right? But this is really a missing score and something we're going to have to explore as we move on. But I think we've hit our point today. So, Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter. Embrace discomfort to reclaim your wild, happy, healthy self. Get that on bookshop.org. If you have anything you'd like to rant about to Jake, please put that in the comments and like and describe as well. Anything you'd like to add about discomfort or comfort, maybe what your score is in terms of the types of resilience, or maybe any of the comfort creeps on the roster, or any takeaways you got from Michael Easter's book that you would apply either as a coach, a parent, or an athlete. Anything else, buddy, before we kick it off for the day?
Let's get uncomfortable. Find a way to be uncomfortable today, Kevin.
find a way to be uncomfortable today. I think that is going to be a great way to call it. Find a way to be uncomfortable. So thank you for listening, everybody. We'll see you on the next one.
Thanks, everyone.